heroes here to save the day. One check, superheroes make everything okay.
All right, we are the Armchair Superheroes. I am Pat Lane, as always, here with my boy Josh Allen, and you will actually get a podcast this week. Unlike last week, I did actually remember to record this room.
First thing I checked.
So not only do you get to listen on Green Room, but on Spotify's Green Room, I should say, but you can also listen in podcast form this week, which is pretty exciting. If you're listening by podcast form, you're probably like, where the hell did it go last week? That's what happened. So yeah, we're back though. And episode 3, I'll tell you what, man, it seems like a filler episode, but it definitely, like, the more you look into it, the more you read into it, the more you kind of analyze it, I feel like it definitely was not a filler episode.
There's aspects of it that I do think are kind of filler, but I mean, if you do, like you said, peel back the surface a little bit, there's some really intriguing things that were brought up, that were mentioned, that were shown, that were talked about, that will kind of lead into what's coming up. I mean, after episode 2, we were crowned the best TV show, to come out of Marvel yet, over WandaVision and Falcon Winter Soldier. Episode 3, kind of, I think me and you both talked about it, kind of put us in our tracks a little bit. Like, well, maybe it's not quite there yet, but some of the things that it set up, and some of the revelations that it made too, especially in the current month we're in, was definitely interesting and really cool to hear and really cool to see. I know with you, my biggest gripe was the background. Oh man, what were your thoughts on that? I mean, I thought they could have done a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it was pretty obvious it was filmed in front of a green screen. I mean, the majority of these things are, of course, but like it was kind of jarring when you saw it. Like, wow, they are really, really in front of a green screen, and you could almost see, the I don't know what you'd call it, but kind of the difference, right? And you could see it, like they're moving, and it looked really strange.
The difference between when they're on set in the location and when they're behind the green screen was very noticeable. It's like, couldn't you walk over to the Mando set and borrow that Oculus 3000, whatever the heck it's called,
right?
Fill in front of that.
Yeah, anything, man, anything. So it was rough. So, Vince and Esther here. What's up, guys? Thanks for coming through. Man, that one part of it was rough, and I will say the action set pieces haven't been amazing. It is kind of like the guy from Screen Crush, Ryan Airy, who I love that guy. He does a great job. He pointed out he's an Asgardian, and he's like having trouble with a redneck in episode 2. It's kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, he's an Asgardian. Like, he should better beat these guys' asses. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, okay, there are some aspects to it that are a little bit far-fetched but this episode, and really where the meat of this episode comes from, and you touched on it a little bit, and there were so many things to kind of hit on. But I think the biggest revelation to come from this episode is something that we predicted last week, which, if you weren't here literally in the room last week, you didn't hear it. But one of the things that we said last week, which we weren't the only ones to say it, of course, was that there was a possibility that the TVA agents were all variants, and that they didn't know it, but they were all variants and had their minds wiped. And turns out that's exactly the case, that all the TVA agents are, in fact, variants, and they have all had their minds wiped. And so that was a huge revelation to come about. And so, that's going to really I think that's going to steer the way the rest of this, and we're halfway through, right? That's going to steer the way the rest of this series goes, and ultimately what's going to happen at the end. And I think there's some interesting theories as to how they got where they got to, how they're going to get out of there, right, which we'll get to. But I just thought that revelation itself was so huge and so massive, and it seems to me like when they get out, when Sylvie and Loki get out, clearly they're going to have the assistance of the TVA as opposed to fighting against the TVA, simply because I think they're going to find out that they are all variants, and they're going to be like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I mean that was definitely interesting to find out. We kind of predicted about it, hypothesized it last week, but to hear it kind of come out even so early, episode three. I know it's only 6 episodes, but I figured they'd wait for that to be like, episode five, big reveal, and lead it into episode six. But to get it here in episode three, was kind of interesting that they've done it early, and really, it drives the storyline, but where does it drive it to? How early are these people going to find out their variants? One of the things that, the beginning of the episode, the very beginning, where you're seeing Sylvie use her powers and how it works on different people, as such as a TVA agent, and then how she set all that up after that, prelogue, preamble, whatever, pre-screen, whatever before the credits, pre-credit scene, sorry, or pre-opening credit scene. And then you snap, and she's at the TVA office, and she's going to find out where these timekeepers are, and what was her plan. Once she got up there, these are supposed to be all powerful beings, and here she is, um, a sorceress, I guess if you want to call her. What was her plan, and what still is her plan? Because you mentioned that is to get back there and destroy the timekeepers, but that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and Vince, I agree with you that Sylvie is quite good looking, and it's interesting because Loki and Loki were kind of flirting with each other, right? If Sylvie actually is a Loki, and the she has another name too, and I think they're kind of borrowing from the comics, and it's man, it's not like seductress, it's something like that. It's oh, for God's sakes, I can't remember the name. It's going to kill me. I'll find it. But
Not
they
the
are.
Enchantress.
That's it, Enchantress. Thank you. So they're hypothesizing that they're kind of using her because the Enchantress is named Sylvie, and does have and I think Loki gives her power. So I think that they're kind of borrowing from that character. Now I do think that this is a variant of Loki, but I think they're definitely borrowing from the Enchantress character. Um, I think that's going to be interesting. And Vince, one thing I wanted to bring up, and Josh alluded to it earlier, but it's interesting about Loki. It is Pride Month, and Loki confirms that he, in a very subtle way, but confirms that he is in fact bisexual. And I think he from episode one in the gender it says fluid, right? And we're like, oh yeah, because you know that he can change into men and women and do all that. But like, it is interesting that he does just mention it, like, oh yeah, yeah, men, women, a little bit of both, a little bit of both, like just so casually. I thought it was interesting.
Well, not just Loki either, but Sylvie as well.
That's true. Yep.
They both. We have two of our first bisexual characters in Pride Month announced, and that was huge. That was a huge revelation, and the more steps Marvel takes to open up these avenues and these lanes of conversation. And it did get swept under the rug, but people like us are all going to talk about it. People are going to talk about it. They didn't have to, go into a whole thing about it for people to bring it up and talk about it. And I mean, see what they did. There's a big focus on women empowerment right now. And you saw WandaVision, mental health. You saw WandaVision. There's obviously, civil and societal injustice, and you saw that in Falcon Winter Soldier. Here we are in Pride Month, and they're dropping a bombshell that Loki and Sylvie are both bisexual. So their timing with current events and with what's going on in the world with these different things is just on point. And that was something we talked about in episode one. What are they gonna do for, like, how are they going to bring it to real life? And even though it was just, as you said, casually mentioned, it's still something that's getting a lot of talk and a lot of.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I agree. And welcome to Justin and Emily as well. Thanks for coming through. It is interesting, right? And Vince says, that Sylvie's the same variant as the main character, and it certainly could be. And it's such an interesting look to kind of see where these variants coming from and what's going on and what is the TVA, right? we don't know anything right now. Like, I just feel like everything is so clouded, and we're just not sure about, okay, who is what, and what's happening, and where do these people come from, and what are the variants, and where do the variants come from, and and what's going on with this multiverse, and so I just think there's a lot of questions to answer. There's not I mean, there's a decent amount of time to do it. You got 3 hours, right, to do it, but like, there's 3 episodes left, and it's like, how are they going to land that plane? But I will say, so there's a few different kind of theories about, because obviously I enjoyed the episode. I thought that the background was amazing. That final scene where it kind of looks like all one shot, and they're following them around, and you really feel that like they're on like the edge, like trying to get there, and then of course the arc blows up and everything else, and so they're like stranded, and the episode ends, and we're like, that's it, like they're just done.
Yes.
So there's some possibilities, right? So some people thought that he has the time stone, that he stole a time stone from the TVA and has one with him, and that's why when the building was falling on top of him, that he just magically pushed it back up where it belongs. And if you watch that again, you can see like some of the brick going back, almost like it does with Doctor Strange. The interesting thing about that is that you'd say, well, yeah, but it doesn't, wouldn't he have to do the whole thing and everything else? If we're seeing it from Sylvie's point of view, right? If we're seeing it from Sylvie's point of view and not someone else's point of view, well, then you say, okay, well, wait a second. In Sylvie's point of view, it's happening instantaneously. She doesn't even know. She doesn't even see it happen. And so that could be this. That could be the case. The other theory is that he has one of those working, one of like the working wall things, right? That he showed her a broken one, but he has one that's working, and he basically played this out so that he could get more information from her. That's option number 2. And option number 3, I think. Well, actually, let's talk about those 2 options, about those 2 theories, Josh. I'll let you weigh on them, and I'm going to give the third option, which is my favorite one, which I think hopefully is the real one, but who knows? So anyways, what do you think about those 2?
Yeah, I mean, when the guy, what was it, episode 1 or 2, when he opens the drawer and it's just full of time stones, I would not be surprised if he did grab a few of those stones, and he has them readily available to use. That would not surprise me. I mean, both are great options, but like, just to go back, like, we've seen Loki's powers before to an extent, and that's not something that I've thought that he was capable of. So if he's not using a time stone or some sort of boost to his magical ability as it is, how is he able to push that building back up? When I first saw that, I was like, wait, what? How is he? He's had many instances where he could have used powers like that in the past, and he has never used it. I mean, think about it when he was confronted by Thanos, or in Ragnarok, and he's never used that power, but now all of a sudden he does have this power. So that didn't make much sense to me. The time stone, I think that makes a lot of sense, or any stone, to be able to have, one of those stones for sure. But then again, I mean, if you look, you mentioned that last scene, they truly are panicked on trying to get, back to that arc, going through the beautiful cinematography. If he did have stones, why would he be so worried about it? So I'm curious to hear your third.
All right, so here's the third scenario, and it's wild. It's out there, but I love it. So the third scenario is that Loki enchanted Sylvie, and everything from the point when she wakes up on the train is in her head and actually doesn't happen. So it's all happening in her head, and he's getting as much information out of her as he can, just like she did to the TVA agent. He gets all that information out, then they're going to wake up on the train, because she wakes up from the train, and all of a sudden he's got his costume off, he's got everything off. Oh, it's the end of the world, doesn't matter. But like, yeah, no, it kind of does. Like, why would Loki do all that? It doesn't make any sense, Like, it would just be really foolish of him to do all that. So the fact that it could be all in her head, a projection, right, in her head, and he's working her. I just think that's so interesting to think about. And then that explains